My son's friends do it to me. Infidelity story. Living in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by families with children the same age as my son Tomas, had its advantages. The house was always full of laughter, games, and the hustle and bustle of childhood. But this year, with the arrival of adolescence, things had changed a bit. Tomas spent more time in his room, with music blaring and his friends glued to the computer screen. One Saturday afternoon, while I was preparing dinner, Tomas announced that his friends were coming over to the house to watch a movie. I felt a little uncomfortable at first. I didn't really like the idea of having a bunch of teenagers rampaging around the house, but I also knew it was important for Tomas to have his own space and his own friendships. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon when the doorbell rang. Tomas ran to open the door, and in walked a group of 5 boys, all the same age as him. They introduced themselves as Lucas, Pablo, Mateo, Andres, and Diego. They greeted me politely and sat down on the couch in the living room. I felt a little nervous at first. I wasn't used to having so many people in the house and didn't know what kind of conversations I could have with them. But little by little, I relaxed and enjoyed their company. We talked about music, movies, video games, and even deeper topics like life, love, and the future. I was surprised at how intelligent and polite these kids were. They were not the typical rebellious teenagers I had imagined. They told me stories about their families, their hobbies, and their dreams for the future. I could tell they were good kids and that Tomas was lucky to have them as friends. The night flew by, and when it was time to leave, I was sad to see them go. I had loved talking to them and getting to know them better. I realized that I didn't have to worry about the influence they might have on my son, as they were responsible kids with values. Tomas' friends still came over on the weekends to watch movies, play video games, or just hang out. I really enjoyed their company and felt more and more comfortable with them. They made me feel young and vital, like I was a teenager again. One day, while I was preparing dinner, I heard a loud noise in the basement. I went downstairs to see what was going on and found the boys playing soccer. They apologized for the noise and invited me to play with them. I was hesitant at first, but then I perked up and had a great time. That night, while we were having dinner, Tomas asked me if it bothered me that his friends came over so much. I told him no, that I really liked their company and that they made me feel happy. He was very happy to hear that and gave me a hug. From that day on, the boys became an important part of my life. They helped me with chores around the house, kept me company when Tomas was away, and encouraged me to go out and have fun. I felt very lucky to have them in my life. One night, while the boys were watching a movie in the living room, I was in the kitchen washing dishes. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned and saw Lucas, one of Tomas's friends, looking at me with a mischievous smile. I felt uncomfortable and took my hand off him. I told him I didn't like him touching me like that, and he apologized. I thought it was an accident and didn't think much of it. However, after a few days, the same thing happened again. This time it was Pablo, another of Tomas's friends, who touched my shoulder inappropriately. I felt disgusted and left the kitchen without saying anything. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to accuse them of anything because I didn't want to create a bad atmosphere, but I also couldn't continue to allow them to touch me that way. I felt helpless and confused. The next few days were very tense. I felt uncomfortable every time I was around Tomas's friends. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, and I felt more and more disgusted. One day, while I was in the garden, Lucas came up to me. He told me that he was very sorry for what he had done, and that it would never happen again. He explained that it had been a moment of weakness, and that he didn't want to lose my friendship. I listened to him carefully and told him that I appreciated his apology, but I also made it clear that I could not allow him to touch me in any inappropriate way again. I told him that I valued his friendship and that of the other guys, but that respect was paramount. Lucas nodded and assured me that he understood perfectly. He apologized again and walked away. I was left alone in the garden, feeling a little relieved but also unsure. I didn't know if I had done the right thing by confronting him without involving Tomas. That night after dinner, I waited for the boys to finish watching the movie and invited them all into the living room. I sat down across from them and took a deep breath. It was a little hard for me to speak, but I knew I had to. I explained that I had been feeling uncomfortable lately because of some inappropriate touching that had occurred. I didn't mention names to avoid creating conflict, but I made it very clear that that kind of behavior was not acceptable in my house. The boys were silent for a few seconds. They looked at me with a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. Finally, Pablo, the other boy involved, spoke up. He stammered an apology and said he hadn't realized he had made me feel uncomfortable. The others nodded their heads and also apologized. I explained that I valued their friendship with Thomas and that I didn't want to forbid them from coming home, but that I expected them to treat me with respect at all times. The conversation was tense, but I think we all understood. The boys pledged not to behave that way again, and I thanked them for their sincerity. The next morning, I talked to Tomas. I told him what had happened with his friends and how it had made me feel. He was shocked. He had no idea what was going on and was very disappointed in his friend's attitude. He assured me that he would talk to them seriously and make it clear to them that this kind of behavior was not acceptable. He told me that he didn't want me to feel uncomfortable in my own home and that he would do everything he could to make sure it never happened again. A few days later, Thomas told me that he had spoken to his friends and they had apologized again. He had made it clear to them that their behavior towards me was disrespectful and that he didn't want it to happen again. The guys apologized once again to me and assured me that they had gotten the message. They were much more respectful from that point on, and the tension that had built up disappeared completely. Little by little, trust returned to the house. Tomas's friends still came to the house on weekends, but this time the atmosphere was different. They behaved respectfully and kindly, and I enjoyed their company again. We continued to have interesting conversations and share good laughs. However, I was always on the lookout for any inappropriate behavior, but fortunately, nothing like that happened again. I know some people might criticize me for my decision to continue to allow Tomas's friends to come over after what happened. They would say I was naive or even irresponsible for not taking more drastic measures, but I disagree. I think it's important to trust people, and in this case, I decided to give them a second chance. Besides, I didn't want to punish Thomas for his friend's mistakes. Also, I think my direct and honest approach paid off. The boys learned a valuable lesson about respect and boundaries. I don't regret the decision I made. It has allowed me to meet a group of amazing kids and create a family atmosphere full of joy and laughter. I have learned that life is too short to live it with fear or resentment. You have to enjoy every moment and make the most of the opportunities that come our way. I have also learned to be more assertive and to defend my limits, something that has served me well in other aspects of my life. However, the truth is a bit more complex. It hasn't all been laughter and deep talks. There was something else in the behavior of her friends, an element I haven't yet mentioned. You see, I used to be a singer with a dream. I left that dream in the trunk of memories years ago, when motherhood completely eclipsed it. I devoted myself entirely to raising Tomas, and my passion for music was relegated to a forgotten corner of my soul. One day, while the kids were playing a video game, I found an old cassette of one of my songs. I started listening to it with a mixture of nostalgia and sadness. By chance, Lucas, one of Tomas's friends, saw me. He asked me what it was about, and without thinking too much, I told him about my past as a singer. What happened next took my breath away. Lucas was an amateur musician. He heard the song and told me I had talent, not to let it go to waste. He encouraged me to sing again, to dust off that old dream. At first, I was hesitant. I felt insecure and rusty. But with Lucas's support and the enthusiasm of the other guys, something awakened inside me. We started playing together, using the basement as a makeshift studio. The music flowed, creativity exploded, and I felt alive again. We discovered that Pablo played guitar, Andres played bass, and Mateo played drums. Lucas, of course, was the keyboard player. Every afternoon after Tomas finished his homework, we would meet in the basement. Music became our common language, an escape from daily routines. A few months later, we organized a small jam session at home. We invited neighbors, friends, and family. Tomas was thrilled to see his mother on stage, albeit improvised. I sang for the first time in years, and the feeling was liberating. The looks of amazement and applause filled me with emotion. But the most important thing was to see the face of my son, Tomas. In his eyes, there was pride, admiration. His smile was the best reward. I know people will still think I'm the weird mother because of my friendship with Tomas's friends. But I don't care. I have regained a part of myself that I thought was lost, and I have created a special bond with my son and his friends. And that, to me, is true redemption. I've learned that life isn't just about raising kids or following societal expectations. It's about finding your own voice, embracing your dreams, and enjoying the journey, no matter how old you are. And sometimes redemption can be found in the most unexpected places, like in the basement of your own home, surrounded by a group of teenagers who became friends and fellow musicians.